night it happened, I had fallen asleep without meaning to. I was still wearing my work socks, one earring, and the hoodie I had pulled over my scrubs after my late shift, because the apartment air conditioner worked with the emotional intelligence of a punishment. I had meant to shower, answer 2 emails from class, and set out my lunch for the next morning. Instead, I sat down on the couch for what I told myself would be 10 minutes. When I opened my eyes again, the living room was dark, except for the light from my phone. At first, I thought it was still on the coffee table where I had left it. Then I realized the light was moving. Eli was sitting at the other end of the couch, leaning forward, my phone in both hands. There is a strange second when your brain notices something wrong before your body catches up. I remember the digital clock on the microwave reading 2:41. I remember the sound of the refrigerator motor turning on. I remember Eli's thumb moving with perfect calm, as if he had every right in the world to be where he was, doing what he was doing. I pushed myself up too fast. "What are you doing?" He didn't flinch. He didn't drop the phone. He didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. He glanced over at me and said, almost casually, "Checking something." There are answers people give when they know they have crossed a line and are testing whether you will let them rename the line. That was one of them. I held out my hand. "Give me my phone." Instead of giving it back, he locked the screen and set it face down on his knee. "Who is Daniel?" For half a second, I didn't even know what he meant. Then I remembered. Daniel was a person I had gone out with a few times in the year before Eli. Nothing dramatic, nothing unresolved, barely enough history to qualify as a cautionary tale. He had sent me a reaction to a photo weeks earlier, and I had not answered because there had been nothing to answer. "That is what you were looking for?" I asked. Eli shrugged. "You still have him in your messages." I stared at him, waiting for the part where he admitted this was a bad joke. It never came. "You went through my phone while I was asleep?" He gave me a look I had seen before in much smaller situations, a look that always made me feel as if I had somehow become unreasonable for reacting to something that had already happened. "I had a feeling," he said. A feeling. As if intuition were a search warrant. As if suspicion were a moral achievement. I asked him again for my phone. This time he handed it over, but only after holding it for one extra beat, a tiny delay that felt deliberate. Like he wanted me to understand that returning it was an act of generosity, rather than the bare minimum expected of a civilized adult. I unlocked it and saw the open thread, the old messages, the dates, the little proof of how far back he had scrolled. My stomach turned. "I didn't do anything," I said. "I know," he said. Then, after a pause that changed everything, "I just don't want to be with someone secondhand." I have replayed that sentence more times than I care to admit. Not because it was clever, not because it was loud, but because it was so nakedly revealing. Secondhand. Like a jacket from a rack. Like a lamp with a scratch on the base. Like value was something a woman could lose in invisible increments while a man stood nearby pretending to count. I actually laughed at first, but it was not because anything was funny. It was the stunned kind of laugh your body gives off when the truth arrives too quickly. "What did you just say?" He leaned back, as if settling into an argument he believed he was prepared to win. "You heard me. I should explain something about Eli. If you had met him early on, you would have liked him. Most people did. He knew how to perform thoughtfulness in a way that made it look effortless. He brought me coffee exactly the way I liked it. He remembered tiny details. He touched the small of my back in public like he was proud to be seen beside me. He said things like, 'I just care more deeply than most people,' and because I was young enough to think intensity was proof of sincerity, I took that as a compliment. Looking back, the early warning signs were not dramatic. They were edits. Why was I still following someone from my old campus? Why did one of my friends text so late? Why did I need a password on my phone if we had nothing to hide from each other? Why was I wearing that shirt to class if I knew there would be guys there? Nothing arrived with sirens. Everything arrived with concern. That is how some people move into your boundaries. Not with force at first, but with 1,000 small requests that all imply the same thing. If you loved me properly, this would not bother you. So there I was, half awake and suddenly wide awake, staring at a person I had trusted enough to let in, and realizing he had been keeping a private inventory of me. "I was with no one before you except ordinary life," I said. "And even if I had been, you do not get to talk about me like that." He rolled his eyes. It was such a tiny motion. I swear that bothered me almost as much as the words. The eye roll said he thought my hurt was predictable, feminine, inconvenient. "You're making this bigger than it is," he said. I'm just being honest. There is a kind of man who believes honesty means saying the ugliest thing available and then expecting applause for transparency. No, I said. You're being cruel. He stood up then, annoyed now that I had not accepted the version of events he had prepared. He started pacing the narrow strip between the couch and the kitchen. If I'm cruel, maybe it's because I'm tired of feeling stupid, he said. You act innocent, but you keep all this old stuff. You keep people hanging around. And then I'm supposed to, what? Just trust that I'm the only one who matters? I remember feeling something cold settle into place inside me. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Because I knew then that this was not about one old message or one name or one social media reaction. This was about ownership. He wanted me in a state of permanent reassurance, forever proving I was not contaminated by a life before him. You went through my phone, I said again, slower this time, as if maybe repetition could restore reality, while I was asleep. Because I had to know. No, I said, because you wanted permission you didn't have. His face changed at that, not much, but enough. People who depend on confusion hate clean language. He stepped closer. Fine, he said, maybe I shouldn't have looked, but you're acting like I hit you. I said one thing. It is almost funny, the way people shrink their own behavior after they have watched it land. As if a knife becomes harmless when renamed silverware. I stood up too. My hands were shaking now, not with helplessness, but with anger finally catching up to shock. You need to leave, he blinked. I'm not leaving over this. You are, I said. Get your shoes. Get your keys. Leave. He stared at me for so long that I could see him deciding which version of himself to become next. Apologetic, superior, injured, seductive. Men like Eli do not switch masks because they are complicated. They switch because they are shopping for the one that still works. He tried soft first. Maeve, he said, reaching for my wrist, come on. I only said it because I'm scared of losing you. That sentence should have sounded tender. Instead, it sounded tactical. As if fear were a ribbon he could tie around contempt, and hope I mistook the package for love. I pulled my hand back. If you loved me, I said, you would not need me to feel smaller in order to feel safe. He scoffed. There you go, making everything a speech. Then he said the sentence that finally burned away whatever doubt I had left. Honestly, no one else is going to care about you the way I do. No one else will understand you. No one else will stay. Care, as if surveillance were care, as if humiliation were care. As if being willing to keep me after insulting me made him generous. I walked to the door and opened it. At first, he looked shocked that I would go that far. Then offended. Then, when I did not move. Furious. You're unbelievable, he said, grabbing his jacket from the chair. This is why it's hard to be with you. Everything turns into drama. I did not argue. I did not plead. I did not explain. For once, I understood that explanation is wasted on people who are not confused. He left. The door shut. And the apartment became so quiet I could hear the pulse in my ears. I locked the deadbolt, checked the window latch over the sink, and then sat on the bathroom floor with my phone in my hands, because it felt like the only room in the apartment with the door solid enough to match how exposed I felt. There is a specific humiliation in realizing someone has read pieces of your private life, and come away not with tenderness, not with context, but with entitlement. He had scrolled through fragments of who I had been before him and somehow decided that gave him authority over who I was now. I blocked his number, then his backup number, then his social accounts, then the messaging app we mostly used when he was at work. I changed my passcode. I turned off the little face unlock feature he used to joke was cheating. I went through my settings and logged out of devices I didn't recognize, even though I was almost sure there were none. By then, it was after 3. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. At 3:26, a text came from a number I didn't know. You're seriously doing this? I blocked it. At 3:31, another number. You're proving my point. Blocked. At 3:37, another. You always twist things. Blocked. By 4 in the morning, the messages had changed shape. Less persuasive. More vicious. No one is going to put up with you. You act innocent, but you love attention. You should be grateful someone still wanted you. That last one did something clarifying to me. Still wanted you. There it was again. The quiet belief beneath everything else. That being chosen by him should cancel out anything he said while choosing. That his willingness to stay was a favor. That I should negotiate from gratitude. I stopped crying after that, not because I felt better, because I felt awake. Morning came anyway, pale and rude through the blinds. I showered. I made coffee I did not want. I stared at my reflection while brushing my teeth and thought, very plainly, this is what it looks like when someone wants the power to define you. At lunch, one of my friends told me he was probably just insecure. Another said guys say horrible things when they panic and regret them later. A third asked if maybe we should all calm down before I did something irreversible. What struck me most was not that they were defending him exactly. It was that they were treating his cruelty like weather. Unfortunate. Unpleasant. But somehow impersonal. As if words simply fell out of men and women were expected to mop around them. I kept thinking about how small the moment would sound when summarized quickly. He looked through your phone. He said something gross. You kicked him out. But the comments on the post I later wrote, and I did write one because by then I needed a reality check from strangers more than reassurance from people invested in keeping the peace, kept returning to the same truth. The issue was not one ugly phrase in isolation. It was the whole pattern. The trespass. The degradation. The immediate attempt to relabel my reaction as hysteria. The follow-up harassment. The certainty that shame would bring me back faster than kindness. That was the part one needed other people to help me name. Not because I couldn't see it. Because I had never seen it this early before. First love teaches a lot of people the wrong lessons. It teaches us to confuse endurance with loyalty. To treat discomfort as depth. To believe being chosen is more important than being respected. To think the first person who learns our soft places automatically deserves access to them. But something in me had survived intact. Something clean and stubborn. It heard the name he used for me and refused to move into it. Later that evening, after work, I came home and stripped the bed because suddenly I wanted everything in the apartment to feel like it belonged to the version of me that had made him leave. I opened the windows. I threw out the takeout containers in the fridge. I changed the playlist I always used when he was over because even the music had started to feel negotiated. And while I was shaking out the sheets, I realized the deepest injury was not that he had thought badly of me. It was that he had expected me to accept the insult and then comfort him for feeling threatened. That is a kind of theft, too. Not of privacy this time, of moral balance. He had tried to wound me and then hand me the job of repairing his insecurity. I did not call. I did not answer the unknown numbers. I did not open the email that landed just before midnight with the subject line, "Can we be adults?" I deleted it. Maybe that sounds cold. Maybe someone listening wants a softer ending. One with conversation and closure, and a speech so graceful it leaves both people wiser than before. Real life does not always owe us that. Sometimes the cleanest ending is the one where you finally believe the evidence while it is still fresh. A person who loves you may be imperfect. They may be messy, frightened, insecure, late, defensive, clumsy with language. But they should never need to reduce your humanity in order to steady themselves. They should not feel safer when you feel ashamed. That is not love with rough edges. That is contempt looking for permanent housing. The last message from an unknown number came 2 days later. Just 4 words. You'll regret this later. I looked at it for a long time. Then I blocked that number too. And for the first time since the couch, the dark apartment, the moving light of my own phone in somebody else's hands, I felt something close to peace. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. First heartbreak always arrives, carrying all your beginner hopes with it. But underneath the grief was something steadier. A knowledge I had earned early, and maybe thankfully early. Anyone who needs to call you spoiled, impure, dramatic, difficult, damaged, or secondhand in order to stay with you has already answered the most important question. You do not have to convince that person to see your worth. You have to leave before their language starts renting space in your own mind.
Thank you for watching. If this story pulled you in, do me one favor. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next one finds you the moment it drops. Remember, nothing is ever just what it seems. See you on the next one.